Good evening. It is January 5th at 6:03 p.m. I'd like to call to order the business meeting of the Portland School Board. And we are going to begin tonight with an executive session. So this is consideration and action to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRS section 4056 to discuss a personnel item. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
And then we go ahead.
Trevorrow and Thompson, is that okay?
Yes. Do we go to questions on this motion? No. Okay. All in favor of going into executive session, can you just indicate by raising your hand? Terrific. It's unanimous, and we are going to go to the link that Anne sent us earlier, and we'll come back to the business meeting after. Thanks, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Education to order. It is Tuesday, January 5th, 2021. The Portland Board of Education is meeting virtually via Zoom. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Bondo, Mr. Burke.
Here.
Mr. Irish.
Here.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Presente.
Ms. Russell-Better.
Here.
Ms. Thompson.
Here.
Ms. Trevorrow.
Here.
Mr. Youssef.
Here.
Ms. Allen.
I think both of them, I think Haley and Tessa are both in the attendees right now.
Anne, can you facilitate their access?
Greg is on it.
Awesome. Ms. Chung.
Here.
Ms. Hill. Ms. Yangala.
Yes, I'm here.
And I see we've been joined by Ms. Allen and Ms. Tessa McCumber. Ms. Boxer McCumber, sorry. Okay, I think that was roll call.
Excellent. Would everyone please unmute yourself for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag.
of the United
United States of America,
To the Republic.
To the Republic.
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
Visible. With liberty.
and justice for all.
For all.
First tonight, we have the report of the chair, and I want to wish each of you a happy new year. I hope that all of our educators and staff got a real break over the holidays, one that was truly more deserved than ever. 2020 is done. We got through it. We got through it together. And I am optimistic about what 2021 holds. I'm optimistic because of our dedicated staff, because of our district leadership that is dissatisfied with the status quo, and because of our community that so strongly supports public education. Tonight, we'll be taking an important step to improve the ability for the community to be involved in our work by considering moving the public comment period for non-agenda items to the start of our meetings. And we'll begin considering a resolution that centers equity concerns around testing that have been raised by the board, most recently in the book we read together last year, How to Be an Anti-Racist, as well as in the Race in America course that the board will soon complete. While the resolution is specific to testing during COVID, it starts to address equity concerns raised by board members. And I thank the superintendent for bringing that forward to us. I want to just quickly run through our procedures for public comment using Zoom. Any opportunity for public comment will be announced. Members of the public can use the raise your hand feature provided by Zoom. This feature is either found on the webinar control bar at the bottom of your screen, or you can find it by selecting your name on the participant screen. I will call on the Zoom name of the public participant with their hand raised to address the board. And members of the public have 3 minutes to comment. If you need more than 3 minutes, I'll interrupt you as kindly as I can to see if additional time is needed, and can grant an additional 3 minutes. If additional time is granted at the end of 6 minutes, your mic will be muted. So thank you very much. And with that, we are going to turn to the report of the students. And tonight we have Haley Allen, who is going to provide an update on student life at Casco Bay High School. So Miss Allen.
Okay, can everybody hear me? I think that's a yes. Okay, so at Casco, the 9th grade is culminated there. We are on Indigenous land expedition. Each student came out with resources forms to educate other youth community members of Indigenous land. The 10th grade just culminated their anti-racism expedition geared towards educating themselves and others why the act of anti-racism is important. The juniors are working on our public policy expedition. The seniors just completed their Art in Action pop-up museum and are getting ready to begin their senior expedition. March to the Post Office is on Friday, and it's going to be streamed on the CBHS homepage, or they're also posting the link on their Twitter account. January 22nd is the 8th grade night. It's a webinar in replacement of traditional 8th grade visits. And the 3rd annual, I think you might have mentioned this, Equity Summit is January 19th. And it's a student and teacher summit establishing anti-racist standards for our community. That's it.
That's so much. Thank you so much, Miss Allen. And now we're going to turn to the report of the superintendent, Superintendent Batana.
Thank you. I would like to begin my comments today by recognizing the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand, the Maliseet, the Micmac, the Penobscot and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki, or people of the Dawn Land, and we're honored to have their children among our students today. I would like to echo Chair Figdor's comments. Happy New Year to everybody, and here's hoping for a return to a more normal 2021. We begin today by honoring Maine's Teacher of the Year, Cindy Sull. Cindy, who teaches at Talbot Community School, is no stranger to the board, as she has been recognized before for being named the Cumberland County Teacher of the Year, and then again being a finalist for the Maine State Teacher of the Year. Cindy, as you know already, is a remarkable educator. Her contributions to Talbot are numerous, as we've mentioned previously, and we're incredibly fortunate to have her as a member of Talbot School and the Portland Public Schools community. But on top of that, as Maine Teacher of the Year, Ms. Sull has an opportunity to extend that presence at the state and national level. So today, I would love to have Cindy spend a few minutes sharing some of her leadership opportunities and the goals that she has set for her role. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Ms. Sull.
Thank you very much for recognizing me again. It's an incredible honor to have been selected and to be able to shine a really positive light on the work of all Portland educators and our incredible learning communities that we create each day. I think that's where my work has begun, in just sharing our story as one of the most diverse districts in the state. Many of the county teachers have been really leaning on me to learn more about the steps that we have taken in terms of equity, in terms of just really taking steps forth with anti-racist work. And an example of that is I have been on a committee that organized a social justice grant. We got a grant from Unum, and we are offering a speaker series, book clubs, where we'll be reading Cornelius Miner's book, We've Got This, and he's going to be a keynote, and educators from across the state of Maine are going to be able to access this opportunity for free. So that's been really exciting work. I think you probably have all heard that I have a thing for science. And so I really firmly believe in the integration of literacy into content of science and social studies, and have found at Talbot that has made an incredible difference in our goals to disrupt the opportunity gap. I've seen all learners really engage with literacy much more meaningfully when there's purpose. And I'm excited to have the network of the Maine Teacher of the Year organization, educators like Tanya Prentice, who is the Oxford County Teacher of the Year, and she has Atlantic salmon in her classroom, in her 5th grade classroom. And Morgan Cuthbert, who is a Presidential Award winner, and he teaches in Yarmouth, I think 6th grade, maybe 7th, but he has aquaponics expertise. And so just being able to tap into these resources and bring them back to our community is just incredible. And beyond our state level, I've connected with with educators, the other teachers of the years already, national teachers of the year. An example of that is Eric June Hale. He's the first Black male educator ever from Dallas, Texas, to be recognized by the state of Texas as a Teacher of the Year. And he was recently on the Kelly Clarkson show, and he talked about being the 1st grade teacher, the ghost of the 1st grade teacher, like seeking that out, like what he needed. And he shared some really personal and powerful stories in a TED Talk. And he has this weightlifting belt, and he speaks about being the champion of children. And I think that's what we're here for, is really connecting educators across the country and across the state to bring together all of our expertise. And I'm excited to share that back with our learning community, and again, share our expertise. I do also want to say that it is nomination time. So if anybody has an educator to nominate, and if you're a teacher listening, I was really hesitant to do this, and I came home and I was like, this amazing woman, Berteller, nominated me. I'm not sure. I tend to be quiet and shy and just do my thing. And my 3 children looked at me and they said, well, what would you tell us to do? And they had me there. I would tell them to go for it. And I'm so glad that I did. The process in and of itself is really rewarding, and just using our voice. So get ready for some science stuff. Outdoor learning is also exciting. Heather Whitaker is working with Outward Bound to bring training for teachers, and she's hoping that I'll be able to participate in a pilot where the Outward Bound people are training teachers to do outdoor learning, and then I would be able to then help staff with that. So just excited to share everything that I'm learning, and I'm here. So if any board members or any educators listening to this, if you have a need or you have something that I can help with, or want me to go back to the state, because that's another integral part, speaking to legislators, being able to advocate. I have weekly calls with the DOE, Department of Education, and I've had a Zoom call with Senator Angus King this spring, and he will be setting up other things I will need to present to the Education and Cultural Affairs. And so let me know if there are things that I can advocate and speak up about at that level. Thank you again.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Saul, I just wanted to thank you and once again congratulate you. I wanted to say I had a chance to listen to your speech for the Cumberland County semifinalists, which was so inspiring and just you're so amazing, and we're so fortunate to have you in the district. I wanted to, since you put it out there, just wanted to pick up what you laid down. The Department of Education just came out with an equity statement. And there is certainly a shift in the way that they're viewing education and their role. So having you there and offering to be an advocate for us is incredibly powerful, and we hope to take advantage of you. Or rather of the opportunity. I'm so sorry. I'll take advantage of the opportunity, and certainly again use that equity statement from the Department of Education as leverage and certainly hold them up to it. It's impressive what they put together and the way that they put it together and the collaboration between everyone to get that statement out. So definitely super excited to have you on board and helping us move that forward. Thank you.
Yeah, and I will say all the training that I've participated in, Educate Maine had a 2-day conference. And it was incredible. Rodney Robinson spoke, and the way that he lifted up educators and spoke of his experiences and really spoke honestly about how stepping away from the status quo is really critical. And I'm kind of known for that, so I'm ready to do that too. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Irish, did you want to say something as well? No? Okay.
I said earlier that we're incredibly fortunate to have Cindy as a leader and as a teacher here in the Portland Public Schools. Thank you, Cindy, for all of your work, all that you do. It's a shining example of the amazing people in the Portland Public Schools. So thank you for sharing your plans for this year. Thank you for, being an incredible professional and elevating the profession in everything that you do. And I'm just incredibly proud to know you and so happy that we're able to recognize you again and again and again and again. So, again, thank you for everything that you do. And let's give Cindy a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you again, everyone. I really appreciate it.
So I want to take this opportunity, since we're thanking people, to thank our payroll and IT infrastructure team for their work always, but especially last week in light of a system outage that brought down our computer network on December 29th. As an organization, we tend to take for granted that the network works and that paychecks arrive in our bank accounts. And we should just pause for a moment to recognize that the only reason that they do is because of the preventative work, the careful planning and the determination of these folks each and every week. That came for me into focus with a short week for processing payroll and that system outage. It was a stressful addition to what has already been an incredibly stressful year for these teams. So I want to personally thank our payroll team of Teresa Demkowski, Terry Bishop, and Kat Jensen, and our IT infrastructure team of Josh Coleman, Phil Dowdy, and Jay Weisberg for everything they do each and every day to keep the Portland Public Schools running. So thank you to them. Portland Public Schools, along with Portland Empowered, Portland Outright, and Maine Inside Out, have been selected by the Nellie Mae Educational Foundation as one of the 3 New England communities to receive a 3-year grant to promote authentic community engagement in schools that centers on increasing the access and voices of traditionally marginalized communities. We were selected because of the important work that is already happening in these areas through the work of all of the partners and other organizations in our community. And we're excited to build on and deepen our relationships as a school system with all of those partner organizations. The grant will be managed by the lead partner, Portland Empowered, and the Foundation for Portland Public Schools will be the fiscal sponsor of the grant. The further details on that arrangement are still evolving, and we will keep you informed as they do. Monday, January 19th is our commemoration of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. School will not be in session because of the holiday. And this year, more than ever, it's important to recognize that Dr. King's legacy of advocacy is not done, and it is incumbent upon those of us who lead and work in public education to continue that legacy. Dr. King once said that, quote, education must enable one to sift and weigh evidence, to discern the true from the false, the real from the unreal, and the facts from the fiction. I urge all of our staff to take this opportunity over the next 2 weeks to take Dr. King's charge to heart and redouble our efforts to help our students to become truth seers and truth tellers, and most importantly, develop the agency to act on those truths for the betterment of our city, state, and country. We're looking forward to the community celebration of the life and work of Dr. King, and Ann Rothacker will be sharing that information with the board shortly. Next, I would like to ask Executive Director for Human Resources, Barbara Stoddard, to brief the board on our implementation of the state's earned paid leave legislation. This bill requires some significant changes in how we operate, particularly for substitutes and coaches. So it's important that you and the community understand the implications of this law. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Barb.
Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. Going to share my screen here. Okay. Let's see. So, as Heather has just said, a new law just went into effect on January 1st. If you look in board docs, I did upload
Barb froze. It looks like Barb froze, or is it me that's frozen?
No, it looks like it's her.
Okay, all right. So let me do the sort of finish my report, and then hopefully can you text Barb and see what, if there's anything that we can do to help. So as we've been doing throughout the fall, we're going to update you on our school reopening. I would first like to thank all of the families that kept us informed over the winter break of any COVID infections in their midst. Our team, led by Assistant Superintendent Townsend, continued to inform school staff and communities about these cases, and we will be publishing our standard weekly update this coming Friday. That update was paused for the past 2 Fridays due to the break, but it will bring everybody up to speed on all of the instances that we've had in that intervening period. As you know, Cumberland County continues to be designated as yellow under the state's health and safety school designations. The next update to those designations is scheduled to happen on January 15th. I do want to let everyone know that at this point, all of our secondary schools have been designated as being in outbreak status at some point over the past couple of weeks. And as I've mentioned before, the formal designation tends to lag our knowledge of the course of the cases. So we continue to take action based on our health and safety team's input and communication with public health officials, but oftentimes that precedes and anticipates the actual designation as an outbreak subsequently. I also want to remind families and staff that our new protocols for returning to work or school after an out-of-state visit to any place other than Vermont or New Hampshire requires a 10-day quarantine process or no symptoms and a negative test administered no less than 3 days after returning to Maine. I'm thankful for everyone following this protocol, particularly after the prolonged break. We can only do this if we're all continuing to work together and endeavor to keep each other healthy and safe. So it's very important. We don't know where people were, so it's incumbent on people to follow these protocols to keep us all healthy and safe. So In closing, as I do at all of these meetings, I just want to acknowledge that we've asked a lot of our staff, students, and families, and that they've risen to the challenge. So let's continue to do that as we continue to work to keep schools open and healthy and safe. So that, I think Barb is back. So
I'm back. That's a first. I'm not sure what happened, and I think maybe I won't share my screen. I'm not sure if there was something that happened with that. If people want to access the slides, you can do that. They're in PDF form there. I'll just run through the information for you, and if you want to ask questions, I'd be happy to answer those. So as we were saying, this is a new state law that just went into effect on January 1st. It requires that all Maine employers who have more than 10 employees to provide employees with what's called earned paid leave. This applies immediately for us to non-unionized employees. And for employees that are covered by a collective bargaining agreement, it will apply upon the expiration of the agreement. Earned paid leave is accrued based on hours worked. And how it works is that for every 40 hours worked, you get 1 hour. And it's capped annually at 40 hours or 5 days per year. The accrual itself begins on the first day that you're employed. Employers have the ability to limit the use of earned paid leave for the first 120 days of employment. There are two categories. There's an emergency earned paid leave and there's planned earned paid leave. So the emergency or unrestricted use is for emergency purposes like illness or some other sudden need. Employers can require a general description of the need for the unplanned leave. And if it's going to be more than 3 days, documentation. If they're using planned earned paid leave, there can be notice requirements. Up to 4 weeks can be required by the employer. Employers can also restrict the use of earned paid leave based on how it might impact business operations. So when this law was created, everybody's feeling is that the Department of Labor didn't really contemplate how it would impact schools and municipalities. You know, it was really intended to provide a floor for people who don't have any type of paid leave. So there are challenges to integrate this leave when other leave already exists. Really, districts across the state are dealing with implementing this. So currently, we're working with legal counsel and payroll to finalize our administrative procedure to comply with the law. Regular employees in the district will have earned paid leave that runs concurrent with the existing leave that they have per their employment agreement or the collective bargaining agreement. So no new leave will be created for people that already get leave from the district. Temporary employees, and so subs and coaches and other folks who work for us but don't have leave, will receive this accrual. So those are some basics. Obviously, the intricacies of implementation and operationalizing this is taking some work with our payroll and our finance system. And so we actually have that set up. It's ready to go, and we're just finalizing the actual administrative procedural document. If people have questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stoddard. Do any board members have questions? Okay, thank you so much.
I just want to thank Barb for her work and the work of her team in the implementation of this important law. We thought it would be important for the community in general and for the board to understand the complexities of implementing this well-intended law, particularly for some groups that we don't consider permanent employees. And as Barb mentioned, this is, having ramifications, repercussions for school districts, and I guess municipalities as well across the state. And so this is a subject of significant discussion among superintendents, something that we hope to address through the legislative process this year. So just we thought it would be important for you to understand that. And I think I know that concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Botana. Now we're going to move to the report of the Secretary, consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of our December 22nd, 2020 meeting. Is there a motion? Ms. Trevorrow, is there a second? Mr. Youssef, thank you. Are there any questions on the motion? Okay, I see no questions. Is there public comment on the motion? So again, this is a motion to approve our meeting minutes from our last meeting on December 22nd of last year. Okay, I see no public comment. Is there any board discussion? Okay, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you are in favor of approving the meeting minutes from our December 22nd, 2020 meeting. Superintendent, will you call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair, Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Irish,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ms. Russell Vetter,
Yes.
Ms. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Ms. Allen,
Yes.
Ms. Boxer McCumber, sorry about that. Ms. Chung,
Yes.
Ms. Yangala,
Yes.
and Chair Fisher.
Yes. So the minutes pass unanimously with the students voting with the majority. So next we will consider consent items, and Superintendent, will you speak to this item?
Yes, Madam Chair. Under board policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district as required by that policy. All of the donations are listed in the board agenda under this item. Our practice is for each donor to receive a written contribution acknowledgement, expressing our heartfelt gratitude as well as for their tax purposes. I would like to thank the many generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value and historical or commemorative significance, including $100 from Gail Cressy to support students and families. Clothing for students in need from Ocean Avenue School students, Arthur, Nora, and Henry Libby, who as part of a service project raised money to buy new socks, new pants, and new gloves for the Ocean Avenue School clothing closet, and a 2004 Ford Ranger from Marlene Cormier, a 2004 Acura MDX from Emily Dickinson, 2008 Honda Odyssey from Gadiel and Jacqueline Rosemarin, and a 2008 Audi S6 Quattro from Marco DeLudi for use by Paths Automotive Technology Program students. We're very grateful for all of their generous support and contributions to the work of the Portland Public Schools.
Thank you so much. It's always a highlight to hear the tremendous contributions from the community. Now we are on to new business. And first, we're going to start with first read of revisions to policy BEDBA, which is our agenda format. And this policy is being revised to move public comment for non-agenda items to the beginning of our board meetings. This allows the public to speak to the board early instead of waiting for the end of the meeting. And this practice is in place for city council meetings. And members of the public have advocated for this over the years. Next, we're going to move to first read of the resolution to support the administration's decision not to not to administer the access not for ELL assessment in the 2021 school year. Just a reminder that there are no comments on first reads, and we'll have workshops on both of these first reads at the conclusion of our business meeting. So now we're on to old business and consideration and action to ratify an update to the PEA contract Article 10G. Is there a motion? Ms. Trevorrow, seconded by Mr. Burke. Is that okay, Mr. Burke? I didn't mean to be presumptuous. Thank you. Mr. Superintendent, would you like to speak to this motion? You're muted. Still muted.
Maybe that's why we step in.
It is. I was going to say, can you unmute yourself and step in? We had a workshop on this on December 22nd. So I'm just going to do a very quick refresher. I did upload some slides if you wanted to go back and look at them, but we've gone through this during the workshop. We discussed the process for making changes to the PEA contract between negotiations or formal negotiations, and we used the Living Contract Committee to do that. The possible outcomes of work done in that committee could be an MOU or updated language. So in this case, the Living Contract Committee agreed on updated language that would ensure a non-supervisory lunch break for educators. The language change was ratified by the association in mid-December, and so we're bringing it forward for board approval tonight. The issue of the lunch break came up through our middle schools. The existing contract language directly addresses elementary teachers with a 30-minute duty-free lunch. But for secondary administrators, it simply states that they will have a lunch period free from supervisory responsibilities. So when we tackled the issue, we took a look and we learned that the implementation of the contract was inconsistent across middle schools and high schools. The updated language provides 20 consecutive minutes of break time in the middle of the instructional day. And the new language will become effective when the district returns to full-time in-person learning, or if our hybrid model is changed and the student day is extended to the full length of the non-COVID, non-hybrid student instructional day. So I'm happy to answer questions. We hope that you'll vote to approve these language changes to the PEA contract tonight.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stoddard. It was an excellent review of our workshop from our last meeting. I see that Mr. Rodriguez has a question. So now we're on to questions on the motion, and Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Barb, so now all three levels, elementary, middle, and high school, have a 20 consecutive minute break, correct? And that's like it was not consistent across all three of the levels before this policy change.
That is correct. Elementary has a 30-minute break, and the secondary now has a 20-minute break.
Are there any other questions on this motion? Okay, is there any public comment on the motion? Again, to use public comment, use the raise your hand feature, and see Ms. Foster. Carrie, you go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. This is Carrie Foster. I'm the president of the PEA. Just wanted to note that we did pass this and would urge you to also do so. It was a great piece of collaborative work over, it seems like forever ago now. We did a lot of the work last school year. And I would like to recognize both the PEA and district representatives on the committee for putting in that time. From the PEA, we had Brian Dodge, Carrie Dowdy. I was on there with Lisa Hatch, David Hilton, Jen Jackson, and Martha White. And from the district, we had Superintendent Botana, Malia Nally, Sue Ellen Santiago, Boyd Marley, Kevin Stilfen, Barb Stoddard, Aaron Townsend. People worked together really well. We came together to something that I think was mutually beneficial. And that's it. We just want to urge you to pass, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Foster. Is there any other public comment? Just as a reminder, if you want to address the board, use the raise your hand feature. Okay, I don't see additional public comment, so I'm going to close the public comment and move to board discussion. All right. I guess I will echo Ms. Foster's comments and really want to raise up and appreciate the collaboration. And I know this, the opportunity to use this element of the contract the Living Contract Committee has not, to my knowledge, been used before. And it's great to see a problem and come together to address it in this way. So I really want to appreciate both the PEA team and our team, and thank you for this great work. So with that, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you will ratify this update to the PEA contract Article 10G.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Irish,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better,
Yes.
Ms. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Trevaro,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Ms. Allen,
Yes.
Ms. Boxer McCumber,
Yes.
Ms. Chung,
Yes.
Ms. Yangala,
Yes.
and Chair Figdor.
Yes. So the motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority. And now we are back to Barb with personnel issues. And first we'll start with consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed. These are probationary items. Is there a motion? Mr. Irish, seconded by Ms. Thompson. And Ms. Stoddard, would you like to speak to this motion?
Sure. This one is a regular hire for a mid-year retirement that we're asking you to approve this evening.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the motion? Okay, there is no public comment on personnel items, so we will move to board discussion. Is there any board discussion? Okay, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you're in favor of approving this personnel item, the probationary one. Mr. Superintendent, would you call the roll?
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Irish,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better,
Yes.
Ms. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Trevaro,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Ms. Allen,
Yes.
Ms. Boxer McCumber, Ms. Chung,
Yes.
Ms. Yangala,
Yes.
and Chair Figdor.
Yes. So the motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority. And now we are on to consideration action to approve the personnel items listed. These are 1 year only positions. Is there a motion? Mr. Burke, seconded by Mr. Rodriguez. Ms. Stoddard, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yes, thank you. So tonight we're bringing forward 2 one-year only candidates. One is an administrative hire, and the other is a teacher hire. The first one, this administrative candidate that we're bringing forward for approval, is to hire an interim assistant principal at Moore Middle School. This hire is related to the shift in leadership at the district's remote academy. The current assistant principal at Moore, Jake Geisman, will be assuming the role at the remote academy for the remainder of the school year, which has created a vacancy at Moore. So you'll be introduced to both Ms. Otunu and Mr. Geisman and hear more about these transitions at the January 19th. The second is a one-year only, so connected to Room Academy. We had an educator at East vacancy at RA, and this would need to back opening at East End.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stoddard. Are there any questions on the motion? Okay, again, there's no public comment on personal items, so we'll move to board discussion. Any discussion on this motion? Okay, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you support the personal items listed, these two one-year only items. Mr. Superintendent, would you call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Irish?
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Ms. Russell-Better?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
Ms. Allen?
Yes.
Ms. Boxer-McCumber? Ms. Chung?
Yes.
Ms. Yangala?
Yes.
And Chair Figdor?
Yes, so the motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority. And now we are, I almost skipped public comment, so excuse me. So given that it's before the hour of 10 o'clock, is there any public comment on items not on this evening's agenda? As a reminder, here are the procedures for how public comment will be taken. Members of the public are to use the raise your hand feature provided by Zoom. I don't know if others are noticing, but on my most recent update of Zoom, I now have a really nice picture of a hand, image of a hand. I hope you do as well. It makes it even easier. The feature is either there where I saw it on the webinar control bar at the bottom of your screen, or you can also find it by selecting your name on the participant screen. And I will call on the Zoom name of the public participant with their hand raised to address the board. You have your, please state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to comment. So is there anyone who would like to address the board tonight? All right, I don't see anyone tonight. So with that, I will close public comment and we are ready to adjourn. As a reminder, we have 2 workshops after the conclusion of our business meeting. The workshops are on both of our first reads tonight, the resolution regarding access testing and the change in our agenda format. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, Mr. Superintendent.
Just, if you could just remind everyone that we did not adjourn from the executive session. We are returning to the executive session after the workshops. So we probably should not have an adjournment until we actually return from that. So we should shift directly into the workshops and then adjourn when we come back from executive session. So, and that executive session is a continuation of the original one. We did not finish in the prescribed time, and so we came back and we'll return to the executive session.
Thank you for that good correction. So with that, we are going to move right into the first workshop, which is the revision to policy BEDBA, our agenda format.
Yep, and that is, I'll take a first, crack at this. What we're proposing to do here, it's a relatively small change, as you can see, to the agenda. The board has a policy that describes the actual agenda, the order of agenda items. And so this is a change that brings the public comment from the end to earlier in the agenda. So it would come at the waiting to get my red line to come up after the establishment of a quorum. So the attendance taking, that's when we would do public comment, and then we would move into the pledge, report of the chair, report of the students, and so on. This is something that the board has talked about for a while. Chair Rodriguez and I had talked about doing this last year, and then with the multiple issues that we've had to deal with, it just never actually rose up to the level of, let's get it done. And then we were reminded again recently about the challenge that it presents for some members of the public to have to wait until the end of the agenda. Folks also indicated that oftentimes it feels like, by then the discussion is done. And so this provides people an opportunity to give us their thoughts and inform the board's conversation, as opposed to coming after the fact. I will say that, traditionally we have tried to, the extent possible, to do a first and a second read, and the first read, if it's a substantive issue, accompany that with a workshop, as we're doing today. So that does provide people with an opportunity to provide public comment after the workshop, before the board, before the board votes on it on a second read. But this will actually give people an opportunity to do that on the date of the actual vote. So I think that's the idea behind this. I don't know if Chair Figdor or Mr. Rodriguez, you wanted to add anything to this. But I will say one thing that we had talked about mentioning is we did not go through the committee process because it's a fairly small change, and we didn't really see any value in going through the committee before bringing it here. It obviously is a topic for discussion among the board, but we did not follow the normal sort of committee process on that. So just wanted to bring that to light.
Thank you so much, Mr. Superintendent. Yeah, I'll just add that, we talked about this quite a bit last year as part of the policy committee, but had such a full agenda, and then also it didn't substantively need work. So I think that this approach, taking it directly to the board, makes a lot of sense. And, I think as you all know, I started my involvement with the board as a parent, and always found it very challenging myself, as well as working with others who wanted to bring issues to the board or address the board in different ways, to figure out how the timing of that while juggling childcare and work and life responsibilities. So I think that this is a really important change that will help give our community more of an opportunity to engage in our work. So just add that personal observation. Mr. Rodriguez, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nothing substantive, but I just wanted to maybe pose it as a question. But another change that we had contemplated was moving the personnel items to the front of the agenda as well.
those being mostly procedural. And the thought behind that was so that we wouldn't have staff, particularly Ms. Stoddard, sit around for long meetings for something, again, that ends up being mostly procedural. So is it possible that we can make this change here as well, or is there a reason that was not included?
We did not include it because we didn't want to make too many changes without going through the full vetting process. Ms. Stoddard said that she loves to be the closer, and she feels like everything else is a warm-up act to her, sort of main event. So, we didn't want to take that away from her, but, again, you could potentially make those changes, next at the next meeting if that were the will of the board. Barb, I tried.
Barb, what are your thoughts?
I'm fine either way. The only thing I think is sometimes when we have people coming that we're introducing, that they're waiting around is a little bit of a drag. But if you want to move it procedurally to the front, that would be kind. But I'm fine with it either way.
I don't want to get overly technical, and I don't have strong feelings about it. But in the case, for example, of Pamela and Jake, we specifically did not bring them to the board today because we didn't want to have people waiting through the process, and to actually sort of introduce them before the board actually acted on it. Always gets hairy and awkward. So, I think that from my perspective, I'm good to keep it where it is and then to just bring people that we want to introduce to the next board meeting after that, so that there isn't, not that, as I think the reason that this is being discussed is because it's generally procedural. You don't reject the recommendations that we bring. But if we ever were in a situation where you would reject it, it would be super awkward to somebody to have to wait to even be at the board meeting and then to be rejected. So I think from my perspective, I'm comfortable bringing people to the following board meeting as opposed to having them, wait to then hopefully get approved, or if not be introduced. And so that was super confusing. I hope that it made sense.
I understood that. Was that clear to other board members? Kind of two different models suggested, with the superintendent suggesting that perhaps a better model would be to have staff come to, after we approve them, to have them come to our subsequent meeting during his remarks. So at the beginning of the meeting, he would introduce them to us.
Which is what we plan to do. And obviously that doesn't take away from moving this to the earlier part of the agenda. I still think that it would make sense for us to not bring people at that particular meeting.
Any other questions on changing our agenda format? Ms. Thompson.
Thank you.
Right. Sorry.
I'll lower my hand now. So I think I've seen every iteration of this over the last 15 years. And we've made, I agree, I didn't think about when Mr. Rodriguez brought up about the personnel. And we had talked about it in the past to do it right after the report of the secretary. But I don't see why that sounds like a great idea to me. But I was wondering, we had a report, and I can't remember the year, and I know Ms. Figdor asked me about it. And there were conversations that from a consultant that we hired about public comment and how we could improve our work. And this was one of them that was suggested back along. And so we've moved, things around. But I'm wondering too that we've had, I think, both ends of the spectrum, people saying that it's too late, too early. And so I'm wondering if we don't move public comment up to have at the beginning, but also allow it at the end for those, because sometimes if we start an earlier meeting, people are still working, what have you. So it leaves an opportunity. It wouldn't be duplicative of having somebody be able to talk public comment on the same exact topic at the beginning and the end necessarily, but just to allow a broader public comment period. And I think it just gives people that are later in the evening, want to feed their children, et cetera, and then come out later, but also those that are coming out of work can do it at the beginning. So I would like to see us have it at both ends of the agenda, and just have it as that it's not duplicative, that if you've already spoken about a subject at the beginning of the meeting, unless it's another topic. So I just think the more the merrier, to allow the public to talk, is my thought. So I'd like to see us do it at both ends. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Ms. Chung.
Yes, to build off of what Ms. Thompson said, I was wondering if we needed to have, for public comment, for them to be present at the meeting. Because if we wanted to get lots of involvement from people, like a lot of the people in our district, like parents, might not be able to like even attend the meeting at all. Because like my parents are clocking in at work around like 4 o'clock and are coming home around like 11. So like if they wanted to say something at the meeting, they wouldn't really be able to at all. So would it be at all possible for people to like film a video and then talk about like maybe an issue that they had that they wanted to bring up to the board? Oh, sorry, I'm just gonna, because when people are talking to the board, it's also not really like a discussion between the parent and the board. It's kind of just like they're saying their piece, what they think about it, and then the board can sometimes build off of that, but it's not really a back and forth is what I noticed. So I was wondering if that was all possible.
Thank you, Ms. Chung. Ms. Russell-Better?
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment. I thought Ms. Thompson's idea is interesting. I hadn't thought of that, the more than one option for comment, but I also wanted to just share from my own experience about the waiting for hours. And, you know, as a parent and busy life, as Ms. Figdor mentioned, that has been frustrating to me in the past. I feel like being able to be on Zoom has really, you know, clearly expanded our, you know, ability to, or, you know, it's provided more flexible opportunity for people to engage. So I think that's wonderful, and wanting to be able to continue with that. I think the way I'm seeing it is having like just the regular solid time. I think that, but again, knowing that people's schedules, that 6 whatever is probably not, it just won't work for everybody, right? But my thinking started to go towards like, you know, having people who maybe needed translation, and knowing that at that time, maybe that would be something that could be, you know, available. But like if it's like hours later in the night, you know, like maybe there'd be ways that if we had this really known time that was available, it might really be something that could increase access. So I just wanted to share support for an earlier time that was a very known time for that public comment. I think just in my experience would be more accessible. So.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. And just acknowledging that we're still not necessarily providing certainty, because some of our meetings start with executive sessions. So some weeks it would be, you know, close to 6, and other weeks it would be close to 7, but we would be able to tell members of the public that ahead of time. And Ms. Chung, maybe I can address your comments for a second as well, which are, you know, I do think there are different ways that we both seek out, but then also, you know, kind of more passive in terms of receiving comments and input from the public. And sometimes we're like going out into the public and asking members of the public to engage with us directly. But there's always opportunities for members of the public to email us or call us or text us and send us, you know, different forms of communication. I love the idea of sending a video. So this is just one opportunity to address the board directly during our business meetings. Ms. Chung, did you have something else you wanted to to say your hand's still raised.
Oh, okay. I can lower it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Thompson.
I think you covered it, Chair. The only thing I was going to add to Ms. Chung's comment is, in the past, in addition to the email, etc., sometimes, depending on the topic, if it's a really hot topic or people want to have their voices heard, we have also had community members or staff members ask us to read something on their behalf. So we have done that in the past as well. So that's also an opportunity, because I know when we get into the larger conversations, sometimes it just doesn't work. So for Ms. Chung's idea, the video is nice, but I'm not sure, how that might work. But we do have the opportunity to read a statement for somebody at times as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Burke.
Thanks. Glad to see this here. I like Ms. Thompson's proposal for the 2 slots. I think that would help eliminate confusion that all of a sudden, we've changed it. Sorry, you showed up at this time. That sort of thing. And like, as she said, more opportunity for comment is great. And just, I would presume that the second would hold the provision that she said of like a non-duplicative comment, but also that it's if before the hour of 10 that the comment period's available. Another issue that's come up frequently is can there be a prioritization of students that are in the queue for them to speak first? So I'll just bring that up while we're here with a simple proposal that we're meddling with now. But if there was a way to do that, I would also be in support of that. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
I wonder, Mr. Burke, how we'd operationalize that. It might, we might need to think through how we could see that through. Mr. Irish.
I would agree with Ms. Thompson and Mr. Burke's comments. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but when documents are posted on the board docs, does social media post announcements to those that those have been posted?
I don't believe that. I will have to defer to.
I only ask because
I don't know.
Sorry.
That we do post it. I know that we do send. We have a list of people who receive notice of the board agenda being posted. So we send that out to a large group of people that have indicated that they're interested in it. I don't know. And I don't know, is Grace with us or is she gone? Let's see, Grace. Oh, Grace is there. Sorry.
Good evening, everybody. We do not put it necessarily on the social media. It's only the business meeting when it's happening that it's posted, and then we post it post the meeting, not before the meeting.
So I only ask because I've just heard through various conversations that finding the information. I don't know that board docs is familiar with just the overall general public, and that if they had the opportunity, if they had a social media presence, that perhaps a lot of the questions that might be posed to the board, if they had the opportunity to read that information prior to, it might address a lot of questions that people might have. So it's just a thought.
I would agree that the board docs is sometimes difficult to find information, so we can figure out a better way to promote the meeting prior to, so that people have the agenda in their hands.
I want to be clear. I mean, I'm all for posting it on, on social media. That should not be a problem. But I really do not want to have a separate process of getting board materials out to people. We had a gargantuan task to take, like today's board meeting was not that complicated, but there are a large number of documents that are attached to it. When, prior to having board docs, somebody had to PDF all of those things, index all of those things, and then, get it out to people or print it out for people. And it was, a significant portion of the person that was in Anne's current position. So board docs affords us a lot of flexibility in terms of, who can do the updates and how to get those updated. And I do not want to get away from that. So, board docs is what board docs is. Once you get there, everything is there. So, making it clear to people, how do you link through so that they don't have to go to our board webpage and do all of that stuff, I'm all for, but I do not want to get us into a position where we're having to add a significant amount of work to somebody. So.
If I can, I didn't mean to separate a notice, just perhaps a link that we receive via email that says, these have been posted. If you're interested, go look at it.
Yeah. It's a link. We can link to the board docs. Javier I think that was I was thinking.
Yeah. That I 100% support. So.
I also would encourage board members to link to specific agenda items in board docs on their social media accounts to help get the word out. So if there's a particular issue at a board meeting that you want to help engage the public on, to post it on your accounts as well. I think we'll reach different people if we're all active in helping to get materials out to the public. Ms. Thompson.
The only thing, and I don't want to get off topic because I think we have more things we want to do, but when Mr. Irish just said that, it brought to, I'm like a very novice board docs, and I don't really like it, to be honest with you, but I don't find it very user-friendly. But I'm wondering, I have heard comments about people being able to access, and I'm just wondering if there isn't a way, Grace, that we could give it's like a link, if, just how to tell people how to get into board docs, because I consider myself fairly intelligent, and I had a hard time for a long time getting into board docs, and I think the community gets frustrated as well. So to Javier's, the superintendent's point, we don't want to create more work, but if there's a way that someone can click on to know how to access it, because it's not really intuitive. I don't find it to be intuitive anyway. I like it now, but just kind of like a little tutorial sheet. If someone can click on it for directions on how to access it, that might not be a bad idea. That's all. Thank you.
I think it's also hard to find on our website. So people, it's buried in our website, so it's not easy to find. So if it is connected to a link that we can put in social media, I think that it'll be more accessible.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Is there any other feedback before we conclude this workshop on Ms. Thompson's idea of having public comment both at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting?
So are we, do we have a sense of the board? I mean, my sense is nobody said that that's a bad idea, but I just want to make sure that, if we go ahead and do that, that most folks are in support of that. So, and I also was looking at policy BEDH, which is public participation at board meetings, and that may need to change because it does speak specifically to during the time allotted at the end of the business meeting and prior to the hour of 10. And it would be, I don't know, I have to think about how to make that change.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Ms. Trevorrow.
Just to chime in, so you have a sense of the board on Ms. Thompson's proposal to do it at the beginning and the end. I'm fine with that. I just think we need to make clear in the rules that it's not an opportunity to repeat yourself on the same topic. And if you've already spoken in the first session, not to rehash your comments in the second.
And would you want to give people an opportunity to speak twice, but on different topics, and then who that puts somebody in the position to judge whether they're speaking on the same topic or not?
It also could, just thinking through some of the meetings where we've had a large number of people commenting, it puts the onus on, some of us to track and remember, make sure that we're ensuring that people are doing as we're requesting. So it is a further complication. Ms. Thompson?
I was just going to say, well, you run a great meeting, so you'll do it no problem, Chair. But I was also going to say, too, that sometimes with a discussion that the board has, it raises something for somebody, so then they wouldn't have said it at the beginning, but now because of the discussion that happened, they'll say it at the end of something different. So that was the only thing as well, too, that it gives another opportunity. If someone was the same person to speak again, and we had it set in our rules, not duplicative. And we also try to always say, too, that if sometimes we have these prepared statements, and we get emails sometimes that are cut and paste. And sometimes we, in the past, have said, too, if someone has already said, the exact same thing you're going to say, please, if you'd like to add to that or what have you. But that way we don't have the same, thing over and over and over again. But again, I just like it at the end in case, we were talking about something and someone says, oh, well, geez, I didn't think about talking about that tonight. So that's all. Thanks.
I guess my one question about that is the public comments on non-agenda items. So would our conversation raise additional issues that members of the public would want to speak to?
Do we answer that? So where it's non-agenda items, but there might be some other conversations, I don't know. There's just opportunities. Again, it provides another opportunity. It's non-agenda items. We did that for a reason. And the 10 o'clock we did for a reason too, because we used to have our meetings go till sometimes 1 a.m. in the morning. And especially we had hot topics. So that's why we put the 10 o'clock in there, so that we had a cutoff. Otherwise, sometimes we were sleeping at the meetings, so into the wee hours of the morning. And that was in person, not Zoom.
I have a question for the superintendent. So a non-agenda item, someone could raise questions or comment from, for instance, your remarks. That's correct, right? Because they're not agenda items per se.
Correct.
So that might be an example. All right, any last thoughts on this before we close this workshop and move to the next workshop? Okay, thank you everyone. Thanks for raising good questions. Now we are moving to a workshop on the resolution to support the administration's decision to not administer the access for ELL assessment in the 2020-2021 school year. Mr. Superintendent, will you?
Yeah. So what we're asking you to do is to support a proposed resolution regarding the administration of the access for ELL assessment for our students, for our English language learners. As you can see in the resolution, we will not be administering this test this year to any of our ELL students. And the resolution goes on, at considerable length to explain the rationale for that. And, sort of in summary, there's really three reasons. One is the length of time and the bandwidth that the assessment requires for administration detracts significantly from our ability to focus on teaching and supporting one of our most vulnerable student populations. There is a limited, so the second one is that there's a limited value to the assessment under normal circumstances. When you see it from a return on investment perspective. So, a significant amount of time spent on the planning and orchestration and, receiving the scores with a significant lag, and therefore not really, by the time that you get them, it's 6 months after the kids took it. And so, they've had 6 months of additional instruction and things along those lines. So just in general, there's a limited value on the actual assessment data that we get back. And then I think the added complexity, the last one is the added complexity this year, and the risk that's associated with administering this assessment to students this year, including the fact that, a significant number of students, over 100 of our students are currently entirely remote. And so having to figure out how to get those kids in to be able to administer this assessment, which cannot be administered, unless people are there, so they can't take it at home. So those are, the bulk of the reasons why we are, making this proposal. So, the plan is for us to continue to hope and to continue to advocate for a waiver being granted to the state by the United States Department of Education. So just to be clear, the Maine Department of Education did request a waiver for this. So they, in essence, agree with the, stance that this is, for all the reasons that I outlined now, not something that we should be doing this year. And so we're still continuing to work that angle and hoping that we actually do get that. But because, as I mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of time and effort that's involved in the planning to administer the assessment, we want to be clear and proactive with staff about the fact that we're not going to administer it, even if a waiver is not granted, because otherwise, one of the reasons that we're not doing this is because it takes a significant amount of work to plan and prepare for this in terms of orchestrating people's schedules and things along those lines. This is not a, everybody come into the room, we're going to sit down and take the assessment kind of an assessment. So it is, a significant undertaking. And so, people would still have to spend a tremendous amount of time in the preparation for that. And then to, if we, were granted the waiver, we would have, in essence, wasted all of that time. And so we don't want to put people in the position where they're wasting their time that would otherwise go into instruction. And so that's the idea. Obviously, if we were granted the waiver, that would be great. And, this is all in some ways for naught. But, we don't want people spending their time and effort preparing for the possibility. So, the resolution is coming to you for a couple of reasons. One is to bring transparency to the decision. So the fact that we have decided to move forward with not administering this. And then also an opportunity for the board to be on record supporting this action. And I think, Chair Figdor referenced this early in, in talking about the resolution, sort of the fact that this is not for the board to approve, but really the sort of a statement of the board's support for trying to establish a better way of, measuring student performance and, endorsing the and supporting our position on this. A couple of additional thoughts. First is that this really came from our teachers, that this is a great example, I think, of how we try to work to balance top-down and, bottom-up ideas. As a district, our teachers advocated for this. We went back and forth to make sure that there was a strong understanding of what we were doing, why we were doing it, and a strong level of buy-in for this decision. And I also just want to point out that this is also a great example of what we think is a strong collaboration with South Portland and Westbrook. They may wind up doing some of this a little bit differently in their own context, but one of the real positive steps is that we've been talking about working together in the area of ELL supports for a number of years, and this is a great place for us to really sort of tackle something substantive, which is, figuring out how do we measure our students' performance in a way that's meaningful to teachers, that doesn't require a significant lag and doesn't require any sort of the acrobatics that we need to do to be able to schedule this type of an assessment. So I think that's an important part of this. One is the joint advocacy. So together, we're about 40% of the state's ELL population between the three districts. So our common resolve goes a long way from an advocacy perspective. And then, our staff really looks forward to the opportunity to work side by side with staff in those districts to figure out how to build a collaborative structure that starts around this particular issue, but then can go into program services and things along those lines as well. So in closing, I just want to recognize our ELL teachers. As I mentioned, this really sort of came from them to start this conversation. But I also want to highlight the leadership that Jane Armstrong and Carlos Gomez and Assistant Superintendent Nally brought to this work. They recognized the concerns that our teachers were articulating and worked tirelessly to understand those concerns, articulate the impact, and come up with a solution that's educationally sound and consistent with our values as an organization. So I think that's my summary of the resolution and why we're bringing it to you. And, I know Carlos is here. Jesse Robinson, our Director of Curriculum and Assessment, is also here. So they will help us to answer any questions, or folks, if I left out anything important, Malia, Carlos, Jesse, please feel free to jump in.
Terrific. I see Ms. Russell-Better has a question.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Superintendent, I think I understand the desire to have a plan whether or not a waiver is granted. That made sense to me, that to want to go forward with a plan. And I just wanted to understand what, if a waiver wasn't granted from the DOE, what are the consequences to that? Just to understand what does that mean? Does that look like to not be granted a waiver?
And we don't think that there are significant consequences at this point, just given our dialogue with the Department of Ed and a sort of past experience in terms of the level of of consequences associated with this type of move. So I'm not concerned about those. On the outside, in a different kind of a scenario, the ultimate consequence would be the state's the state being penalized with some of their administrative funds, and then being put on an improvement plan to ensure that this doesn't happen again. So that's what the ultimate consequences of this could be. So those are, in essence, live at the state level. They don't really live with the district. So we're not, losing any funding. Obviously, the state would prefer for that not to happen, and all of that. But that's where the actual consequences would
okay, thank you. And just to follow up, for the timing of it, I mean, is this something that, like, that waiver being, like, do you have a sense of the timing of that, like with change in federal administration, like? Where
I think that's what they're hoping for, is that with a change in administration, that there will be a different, there will be a different direction in general around assessments on, during a pandemic. I think that's the broader context in which this is happening. But this is the one where, for us, making a decision now is important.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I think that Aura touched upon something I was going to ask about too. And granted, Ms. DeVos will be departing very soon because she denied the waivers. But so there's no consequences on the federal, even though it's a federal mandate. We would not, as an individual school district, face any kind of consequential. Okay, we wouldn't have any of our funding on this local level. Okay. I see your eyebrows going up and no.
No, we've discussed this with the Department of Ed, and they are, in agreement that the consequences would potentially be for them. And then, there could, if this were something that we were doing pervasively and across, all areas, for a prolonged period of time, that the implications could be different from what they are for this, this level of action.
Okay. And I have two other questions. I know that on some of our testing, parents have the opportunity to opt out. There's an opt-out provision on every testing. Even though this was like a federal mandate, if we had gone along with it, is there always an opportunity for parents to opt out regardless of testing? So access is not, even though it's mandated, people can still opt out no matter what. Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to ask you that question.
That's in state law, that exists, that opportunity.
I remember we didn't advertise it, but that there was always that opportunity. And my last question is, when I'm looking through the resolution, and I know that there's the conversation right now with us being remote and having the hybrid and during the COVID. But when I read into the resolution, it goes into a much larger conversation around testing. And so I'm wondering if really they aren't two separate things. One is right now for the COVID, but then also the direction that the board gives to administration, whether it be to form a task force of educators, et cetera, to address the issues. Because I felt like in the resolution, it was well written, but there was a lot of stuff just thrown in the sense of a lot, very broad. And so I didn't know whether or not why that reason was and why we wouldn't give more attention to the studying of getting away from testing on its own, opposed to just throwing it in with a COVID conversation, because I think it is a much larger conversation. And like you were saying, with our conversations around our book review, et cetera, and the conversations we've been having around race, that may be a much larger conversation than a resolution direction could give. So I'm just wondering why we would lump it all together.
I mean, I think it's to offer additional context and to sort of to position this particular action in the broader context in which it exists. It doesn't say that we're doing away with testing. It acknowledges the limitations of a single assessment as a way of measuring progress. And I think that there's nothing in that resolution that says that we should not do any testing. It just acknowledges that there are limitations to it, and and then sort of it works from the broader into the more specific of this particular assessment at this particular time. So I think that's the reason for it. So it's definitely expansive, and it starts at the broad and then works its way to the specific.
And I say that because the first two whereases are very, it's very pointed to say, has undermined educational quality in some of the words that we use, opposed to having, a broader conversation to educate people about why. I know I'm learning a lot through race conversations down. But I think also it's an opportunity for us to educate the community as to why this is not. And I think we're saying some pretty strong statements here. And there are some people that believe SATs and they believe testing and things like that are good. I'm not one of them. But again, I think it's an educational discussion to have with parents in the community as to why. And then when they get the aha moment of, oh, that's why. I worry that it's really deep at the beginning and a really strong statement, but we're really not educating people as to why, what's behind that and why are you saying that? So that's just my thought. I'd like us to go a little bit deeper and separate it out. I'm fine with leaving this, but also I'd like to give more attention to the fact of the discussion around testing overall and have it, potentially a group that is formed with community members and staff. Not that you all don't have anything to do, I know, but
I see it's Nally squirming.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. It's helpful, Member Thompson, to hear the way you are reading and receiving the resolution in terms of those first two paragraphs. I think, as the superintendent mentioned, I think those are intended to provide general context, and there's nuance there. I actually don't think it's saying we're not advocates of some forms of assessment for certain purposes. So if it's received and perceived as a statement that, assessment and testing is bad, I'm not sure that's what's intended in the message there. Yeah, well, I know that's not what's intended.
Because when you see the second one, it says has caused considerable damage. I mean, those are pretty strong statements,
Yeah. So I think that's helpful to hear, as someone's reading this, that's how it would be interpreted. And then I just wanted to just comment as well that the conversation about assessment strategy is a large and ongoing one. So to your point, Member Thompson, that, should we have a task force and a community? There's a body of work that's been going on that is intentionally on pause right now, given everything, because of our desire to prioritize and deprioritize, given how much folks are handling. But I just wanted you to know that that's something that we are working on. I know Jesse is here and Carlos is here, and we're, Jesse in particular, we're itching to get back to that work, but holding ourselves back from going too far too fast because of our understanding of where folks are at this point. But that's work underway, and that will continue to go deeper, especially with other state assessment changes at the state level. So just so you know, that's happening already, even though it's not super active work in the current moment.
Okay. And again, I don't want to, pick apart. For me, when I look at these resolutions, as you know, on some of the other ones we've had in the past, some of them, have been pretty strong, in my opinion. And I think even if we started with whereas the Maine Department of Education, I think it's more about educating the community and the families as to where we're going and why we're doing what we're doing. And so I guess for me, if we could take a look in some way at those first two paragraphs and lighten it up a little bit, because I just find it to be really, and again, it may not be intended, but it sounds like people are being led down a particular path. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Ms. Thompson kind of stole my thunder. I was going to ask a little bit about more of the. So the resolution clearly states that the access testing is it's problematic, not just because of the pandemic, but rather the pandemic makes it even more so than usual. And we've known for a while that there's been a strong advocacy for the access testing to change or for it to not be implemented. I would just encourage us. I'm in a strong agreement with the resolution. I like the way that it's worded. I understand what Ms. Thompson meant about the broad statement. So I appreciate that she brought that up to the discussion and allows us to look at it from that point of view. But I guess I was just going to mention that it is good for the board to have a conversation about our long-term plan for standardized testing, and we have had really small kind of in vacuum conversations about it. But it is important for us to discuss it. I would caution us and all people who are making decisions in public education right now to stop talking about how the pandemic is creating these problems, but rather just to acknowledge that these problems are pre-existing, and the pandemic is just forcing us to deal with them because they're reaching a broader consensus of our students. But the access testing is an equitable way to assess language acquisition. Like everyone knows that, and a larger part of it is because of the way that it's implemented, right? What it requires from us to administer it. So in general, we know that standardized testing does not serve our English language learners and low socioeconomic students and students of color well. So they're here as a standardized test specifically for ELL testers. So, we have every reason to be really cautious about how we talk about it and what we get out of it. To have assessments simply to measure how inequitable we are that's problematic in itself as well. So I would just say that it is good for us to talk about the broad issue of standardized testing and how does it fit within our comprehensive plan. I appreciate Assistant Superintendent Nally talk about the work that has been ongoing and that we need to pick back up. But again, just want to underscore that these problems are systemic and ongoing well before the pandemic, and the pandemic just simply forces us to discuss it, in a broader sense.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Burke.
Yeah, thank you. I support this resolution. I think the reasoning behind it, both in terms of what's represented here and in terms of the thinking of why we're taking this action, makes sense to me, and also the superintendent's thoughts about why to have the board kind of documented support of this action also makes sense to me. It's not directly I'm looking at the second to last paragraph. Let it also be resolved the school board commits to working with educators and other stakeholders to re-examine public school accountability systems in the district and state, and to develop a system based on multiple forms of assessment that reduces standardized testing, more accurately reflects the broad range of student learning, and is used to support students and improve schools. Yes, absolutely. Here for it. How? I don't want to just feel good about that statement. I don't want to presume it's going to happen. Is it the rekindling of the work that you're talking about? And then how is the board going to be involved? Those are some answers that I would love to hear more about in an hour or later. That's my question and comment. Thank you.
Short answer to that is that is the work that that Malia described, that we are, purposely not advancing at the same pace that we would want to. That has been a challenge for us all along. I think, the balancing of having a common assessment and having it be a meaningful and authentic assessment is ultimately what we are working towards. And it is not something that you just click your heels 3 times and get there. So I think the board's engagement on that is to, one, say, yes, that's what we need to be doing. And then 2, help us to put the resources around, making sure that happens. And then, continuing to do the advocacy at the, state and federal level to ensure that, that we have the ability to implement a system that is that, because we're not saying, I think this is the part that, I don't want it to, in any way, shape, or form, be taken away that we should just let everybody do what everybody is going to do. Because, the reason that we put these assessments that, not we, as in the folks here, but, as a country, put these assessments in place is it was super easy to say, like, everybody's doing great, and in the end they weren't. And the ones who weren't are the same ones that were concerned about these assessments being unfair and unrepresentative of. So for us to actually work with our teachers and our leaders to come up with quality ways of showing student performance in multiple ways, but in ways that can be sort of, anchored in a common set of standards is really, really important, and not at all what we're trying to get away from. So I think, I said that was in short, and that was nothing. There was nothing.
Very good clarification. Thank you so much, Mr. Superintendent. Ms. Chung.
I had a question about standardized testing and about the pandemic. It's not 100% related to access testing, so I was wondering if this would be an appropriate time to bring that up, or if you would like me to bring it further to another meeting. It's about the SATs.
Yeah. I think just in general, workshops are a great place to sort of have a broader conversation, and so ask away, and if we don't have the answer, we'll tell you that we don't have the answer, or but
yeah, of course. Thank you. So recently, or just last night, I emailed our principal at Deering High School about SAT Day and whether that was happening. And then Ms. Dame told me that the Maine state as a whole is no longer requiring high schools to administer the SATs. So then we don't necessarily need to have them. So we're thinking, so they were canceled for this year. And a concern that I had is, even though that I can agree with you, or with most people as a whole, that standardized testing might not be able to fully evaluate a student and their intellectual capacity. However, in the status quo, it's still a very necessary part of the college application process. So then taking the SAT day away, which gives all of our students free access to take the test, which is normally I think above $50, which is quite a bit for the average student, I think. And then it kind of puts the burden on the student and makes them feel less likely to take the test, which might have some detriment to their college application. So just thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. It isn't exactly related to this particular issue, but sort of the short answer. I said that before, right? And it wasn't nothing like short. The short answer is we understand that and are working to have a district-funded administration of the SAT, just so that everybody has the opportunity to take the SAT, and that we do it all at one time, and supporting so the state discontinued it because they discontinued a lot of things, and I understand the thinking behind it. We're doing some additional work with the state around, if we administer the SAT, do we still have to administer your other test that you're replacing it with, and things like that, because I do think that as you pointed out, the SAT has meaning to most students, maybe not to all, but to a significant number of students. And, whatever the state is going to replace it with is probably not going to have that, at least this year. So the short answer, again, is we're gonna figure it out, Emily. So, we will have and Ms. Robinson is working on that, along with counselors who have been strong advocates for that same perspective. So I just want to make sure that I shout out our counselors for bringing that issue, in the same way that our ELL teachers brought the access concern. Our counselors have been like, hey, wait a second, what does this mean that we're not going to be doing SAT? So.
Ms. Chung, thanks so much for raising that question. Mr. Irish.
Thank you. And this is more on a micro level. I understand the resolution's kind of moving forward, and I've heard the terms used. It has limited value with respect to the testing, and that there is an option to opt out of the testing. But for those students who were presented from the beginning of the year that here's the standard moving forward, and those students in ELL who really strive to not only meet or exceed the standard, I'm hearing a lot that because of COVID that have we taken into student perspectives, the stakeholders who are most impacted? I'm hearing a lot of, and I don't know whether or not it's supported, maybe it is, whether or not there's negative test results based on, is it a presumption on that there'll be negative test results? And if someone who's in the ELL program, whether in school or remote or hybrid, who's really put forth an exemplary effort to not only meet or perhaps pass those standards to move out of ELL, or even just to gauge their own individual perspective, is there an option for a student or parents interested in to find out where their student stands to opt into an individual test? Or are we just completely removing the whole standard?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to let Carlos, address that. I saw you raise your hand, Carlos. I'm assuming you wanted to do that.
Thank you.
I know that is something that we grappled with because we didn't want to deprive students of an opportunity. So
sure. So the access test is something that measures. It's a tool that measures our WIDA ELD standards, English Language Development Standards, around reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And all of our EL teachers work with our students and collaborate with our general ed teachers to make sure that everyone's clear on what those standards are, what the sort of zone of proximal development is for students. So where can they make growth? Where are they on specific rubrics that measure those standards? And it's something that really our EL teachers constantly assess and work with classroom teachers to make sure that students have feedback. So that's an ongoing process. It's really sort of the bread and butter of what our EL teachers do. And this access test, as Superintendent Botana mentioned, something that's usually given in January and February. Results come back in May. We reflect on it in late May, early June. We make some planning and decisions around scheduling, and then students, go through the summer, and 9 months later, they are in their regular educational programming, in some cases using, 9-month-old results. So we have to come back and again, in September and October, do more of a temperature check and see where students are. So, in essence, students have the opportunity to demonstrate their progress and their placement within those standards throughout the school year. So there's really no penalty for students who don't demonstrate a specific growth. There is, that's important feedback for teachers and informs our instruction and our programming and our resources. But for the student themselves, there's no penalty. Obviously, we want to do everything we can to improve student scores and to celebrate all the gains that students make. So, for students who want to demonstrate that growth, there are still opportunities and ways to do that, independent of the access test. And, one thing that I would add is with the pandemic, with us going remote in March, we had already tested in January and February. So last spring, the MEAs were sort of canceled, and teachers and students did not have the opportunity so they missed that administration of that. But last year we were able to do the access testing. So in essence, this would be sort of one cycle that students miss that assessment.
Carlos, one other thing that might be helpful to share is that for students striving to get the seal of biliteracy, I know that there's multiple measures that we use, so that was a consideration, as well as making sure that there was still going to be pathways for students who are aspiring to that particular standard and goal to still achieve it. is that anything to say about that as well? I just want to make sure that was noted, Carlos.
Yeah, no, thank you for reminding me of that. One of the measures for the seal of biliteracy is proficiency, a 4.5 composite score in access, but there are other ways to demonstrate that through ACTFL, Apple exams, Avant, language exams, completing high school graduation, obtaining a certain score on SATs and other measurements as well. So it's one of multiple measures.
Yeah, I think it's important. And I think Carlos, you referenced this, but I guess maybe to underscore that the really the value of scoring above a certain level on access is that you don't have to take access again. Everything else that is a value from the assessment, we have other ways of measuring and have that information. And so, just scoring 5, which is the sort of the cut point on the test, just means that we don't have to administer the test to you the next year. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're done supporting your journey to English language development, and the information that we get, the underneath 5, what are the competencies that somebody at a 4.5 or at a 3.5 or at a 2, what are the competencies that those students have? That is the work that our teachers are doing every day in measuring the student performance. So, the loss here is not a loss, especially after we've figured out the alternatives around something like the seal of biliteracy. What would the alternative to having a score of 4.5 on access, what would the alternatives be? Once we had that figured out, we didn't see that there was a downside for any student. And that was a big part of our conversation with students. And, for us to be able to access it on a, sort of per request basis puts us in, significant challenges in terms of, being able to set up all of those, the reasons that we're not doing the test. So.
Excellent question, Mr. Irish. Thank you so much. Ms. Trevorrow.
I just wanted to chime in to say that I do support the resolution, and to the extent that you're kind of considering feedback about the portions of it that talk about the value of standardized testing in general, I feel like those statements reflect my feelings about standardized testing in general. So I'm happy to keep them in and have that be an affirmation from the board on kind of that position. So yeah, I think it actually makes it stronger. I was called about this yesterday by the Press Herald, and I was kind of caught off guard because I hadn't even actually read the resolution yet. I normally don't take calls that I don't recognize, but it was during the day and I was working from home and I thought it might be someone from my work. So I ended up kind of having to make a comment without really having looked at it like I did last night. And I found that the language of the resolution was actually stronger than I had presumed. And I was I was pleasantly surprised by what was included in terms of our thoughts on standardized testing and the sort of shortfall that brings and the problems with equity. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trevorrow. I don't see anyone else, so I'll just say that I echo much of what Ms. Trevorrow said. I also, when I read this resolution, was very pleasantly surprised by just the work that we did in terms of framing up this decision. well, it's not a decision on our part, but this affirmation. I thought the framing was very helpful, and in some ways can give our community a sense of where we might be going in terms of next steps. So helping to essentially provide some flags about the limitations and implications of such a heavy over-reliance on standardized testing. So I think that context was really is helpful because it puts this one decision within the broader body of work that we're doing as a district. So unless there's anything else, I think we can close this workshop. Any objections to closing the workshop? Okay, thank you so much for this workshop and for the conversation. I think it was really valuable tonight. So we're closing the workshop, and it's the end of our workshops for the evening. And we are going to now re-enter our executive session. So for board members, you're going to exit this meeting. I see Carlos, your hand. I'll come to you in a second. So we're going to exit this meeting and use the first link that we had for our executive session earlier at the start of our meeting tonight.
Student board members can be excused at this point because we're going back into executive, and it doesn't make sense for you guys to wait around for us to come back from executive to adjourn, which is all we're going to do. So we assume that we have your vote of support for adjournment.
Thank you so much. That's a terrific clarification. And Mr. Gomez, did you have something as well?
No, I was just waving to say thank you, good night, thank you for all your work, and mostly appreciate your support of our teachers. So thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much for being here tonight, and Jesse Robinson as well.
Thank you, Carlos and Jesse. And then Greg, can you put up the board is in executive session sign while we head off?
Okay, we are back, and our remaining agenda item is to adjourn the business meeting. Is there a motion? Mr. Burke? Mr. Burke, did you want to say something?
I was just counting to make sure we had enough people, but motion to adjourn.
I think we're good. Is there a second? That feel better. All in favor of adjourning? Can you raise your hand to indicate? All right. It's unanimous, and we are adjourned at 10:26. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your night. And yeah, good night.
Good night.
Good night.